cycle on this wheel of life. You can put any cycle on a wheel of life, and that includes your life, and starting from when you were conceived all the way to your death. And you only go around once, of course. Cycle, and then you can start a project and go around the wheel with the project. And any cycle can be put on the wheel, and it goes through certain phases all the way around that wheel. Well, one of the things that can be put on that wheel, now the wheel itself, it looks like a true cross, and it's encompassed by the circle. The cross actually goes on the circle itself, and that's the wheel of life. And on that wheel of life, and that comes from, well, it's actually all explained in the tablet. It is all explained in the tablet of Samoin. And so you have the going forth, which is the subjective, and the foundation. And they told man, well, this is the earth. You look at the earth, you see the flat earth. That's the foundation. That's your foundation. And that's the corporeal foundation. And, but there are but it's a foundation in abstract, because it can be any foundation. But it's a foundation here in the outer realm that we experience. Well, then that becomes like an episode or an experience, and then that and you can call that a cycle or a period, but it gets repeated then. And so that the second time through, you actually, since you've gone through it once already, you have already experienced the foundation, whatever conditions those are, you have a more objective view of what's going on. Now, this is shown in the Tablet of Samoin by the O, which is like the sky. They said it's the sky, the canopy over you. And so, for example, if you climb up a tree and look down, you have a better perspective, and you can see more objectively where you come from and where you're going, and compared to, if you're walking on the ground. And so that's the O with the Ah. So you have the foundation, the Ah, and then the more objective O. And then the third condition, which is in the Tablet of Samoin, then is called Esk. And that's where you combine the two. Well, you got your ground and then your canopy over the ground. And so that's you're looking out, and say you look to the east, and you see the ground, the foundation, and then you see the sky over it. But let's see, in the east, let's say you see some conifer trees and a nice clear sky and a sun. Now, that's your focus. The third one is like the third condition, both those together, and it's like a focus. So you're looking there and you're seeing the sky and the foundation together, and that becomes your focus. And you say, well, okay, reality looks like this, and then you explain your reality. But then somebody looking at the south, he's going to see maybe the different type of trees, or maybe he's going to see a grassland, and maybe there's going to be clouds dotting the sky. So what he sees is different from what the first person says, but they're both a synthesis, they're both a focus of the foundation and the canopy. And then you can go all the way around, all these different foci. Well, that means that basically people have individual perspectives and all that, but then you come to the next pulse of the foundation, and it's an integration of all those perspectives. And what's it called in Samoin is called Isek. Isek, which means cosmos. It's the cosmos, everything all together. So it's all integrated and all harmonized together. All these different viewpoints. You can look at the east, that vision, and the west, and the north, and the south. And it's all integrated together, and it's called Isek, the cosmos. And what it looks like is the circle of life, the circle with a horizontal foundation, with the horizontal line. And in the cosmos, so you think, okay, so that's the fourth condition, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now that you got the cosmos, well, now you're basically finished, right? Because you've got the cosmos there. What else is there to do? You got it. And, well, that's where creativity comes in. That's where Jehovah says, aha, well, guess what? What you saw was the outer foundation. Now we're going to show you something else. It's called the inner foundation, and that's called the Yayo in the Samoin, and that's the circle with the upright. And it means, I like to call it the elevator sometimes because, but it's downward forever, upward forever. It's the inner foundation. And I call it an elevator because you can basically go wherever you want to on that elevator and say, okay, I'm going to put my foundation here. And so, if you're a higher grade, well, then you have a higher foundation. If you're a lower grade, you're gonna set your foundations there because it's more comfortable for you. So why, and so that adds variety, that adds spice and everything to life. All of a sudden there's all this stuff that's all these new factors coming into play and all that. And so, so that comes then to the next condition. Because now you have an outer foundation, which was the and you now have an inner foundation, which is the Ieo, and you have the two together on the wheel, and that's the Hoi, the number 6, and that's the wheel of life. And what the sixth pulse of represents is the ideal. It represents the philosophy calls it the create and the uz. Hoi is its name, and it's basically the circle twice crossed, and without belief, just the circle twice crossed, and the ends of the pathways end exactly on the circle there. Well, the ideal also perfection, and so. But here's the thing. Now, why is it called create and uz? Because you have an ideal, I have an ideal, everybody has their own ideals. Now, when two ideals come together, and they sometimes clash when they come together, that's just 6. 6 is the ideal and somebody else's ideal. And so you have two ideals and it can be an ideal that comes out of an ideal. They don't have to clash because it can be a transcendent ideal that comes from an ideal. But in the realm of the beast, it tends to, to clash and all that, but it doesn't have to clash. It doesn't have to be a bad thing or an evil thing. But that's, anyway, so the create and the uz. So you have an ideal. And so maybe someone's ideal over here is to, have a sweet thing every morning. Love that piece of pie. So, but then one morning they say, well, that's their ideal, to have a piece of pie in the morning. Okay, so they have a piece of pie, but then they were mighty hungry that morning and they gobble up the whole pie. Well, they just went in excess. That was their ideal, but they went beyond, they went too far with it. So that's part of the uz part of it, the create and the uz. Or sometimes, people have an ideal they want to move toward, but they can't quite reach it. So they have to settle for something less, and so it falls short. There's a dearth there between the ideal and what falls short. That's part of the create and the uz of the Hoi. And so this ideal, so that's the horizontal, the outer foundation, and the inner foundation, and perfect balance. Everything's beautiful. Now, there's Jehovah, the way he created creation was it has a drift. And we're told this in Owaspy, Fragapati mentions it, that, you're laboring along for the creator and you drift into association with others who are like you. Because that's the way of creation, like attracts like. Well, the drift is like this. So the ideal is drifting. It's moving toward its toward its fullness. And it gets to this point and it reaches the extremes. And it can't go any further, because if it goes any further, then it starts becoming unstable, and it can become sort of like upright again, right? So that's the extremes. And so what happens so this is the fullness of the ideal, but generally what happens though, you move one iota past that, and then it collapses. It collapses into the center because there's no more else. The ideal has been fulfilled, and there's nowhere to go other than it collapses inward. And it collapses, and so it collapses inward. And so one of the meanings of number 7 is limits, a limitation, but it's also a gaining of an understanding, because you learned something. You learned where the limit was. That you can go this far but no farther, that type of thing. Well, in Owaspy and Samoan is called Drew, and usually it's the evil spirits, because the evil spirits use the corners because it's easier for them, and they have more freedom there than they do with the upright. Now, in the upright, that's responsibility. That's like, for them, it's, and it's difficult for them because they can't reach the ideal. They can't keep the ideal. They get over here. This is the fullness of the ideal. Well, heck, they'll just take the fullness. They're not going to work toward it, because you have the ideal and you work toward the ideal, which would be, I guess, like that for you, which would be a clockwise kind of movement, which is a movement toward life, nay, Father, the positive, the male, and the drift is the feminine, the allowing for movement to occur and stuff like that. Well, anyway, so from this collapse, so what do you collapse to? You collapse into your soul is what we do. We collapse into our soul, but basically what we're collapsing into is we're collapsing into a field. And what do I mean by a field? I mean a field like a milieu, like a more comprehensive milieu, a more comprehensive state of conditions. And you don't know what those state of conditions are, because you just collapse into a field. You're like placed out there and you don't know where to go, what's this and what, and so you have to learn to master the elements of your surroundings. You have to learn what's what and what's where, and you don't even know what's good or bad, whether if I do this, is that good, if I do that, is that bad. So you have to learn to do all that. And once you think, well, but how do I even know that there's anything there? And that's number 8. The field is number 8 in Samoan, it's called. And what's in the field is the circle. It's represented by a circle. It's an entity. It has boundaries and everything. So, but this more comprehensive system and order that we fall into is sustained. It has the leaf of life in it that sustains it. That's Eloi. Eloi sustains the system and order that's in the field. And so we have to align ourselves to Eloi, who is the most innermost of all. It's the all person, innermost inside. And he has this, and he knows the system and order of everything. So we collapse into that field. We find the difference between good and evil and all that. And we start to build with the good. And that means that we start building this again, the ideal. And so we look at the next, from the field, we move to the next pulse of the foundation, the next experience of the foundation, and it's Eloi, which is the sustaining of the good, the sustaining of the ideal. Eloi. It has the create and the it has the hoi, the perfection, the ideal, and it has the leaf of life, which means it sustains, it's the sustaining of the ideal, the sustaining of the good. And that represents the good, that represents the good. And so that's the wheel of life. This is where the wheel of life comes from. Now, one thing about Eloi is, you'll notice on his symbol, though, that the crossroads of life, the outer foundation and the inner foundation, they actually extend beyond the wheel of life. Jehovah cannot be confined by any limitation, by any wheel, he's always beyond that. He can sustain the good everywhere, anywhere. So this is, so so there's 4 parts, there's 4 quadrants in that hoi, in the ideal. And so it's, for you, right, no, over here, right. So, yeah. Let's see, is that right? No, it actually had to come up over this way. All right. So anyway, so this is the first quadrant. Second quadrant, I'm doing this by watching the thing. Third quadrant, fourth quadrant. Now these 4 quadrants are important, very important. And as a matter of fact, they were given later to man as the Arbagable in the Divan seal, which was given to through Abraham, and the Arbagable has the ideal in there, it has the Hoy in there, but it shows in each of the quadrants, so that when you're looking at the lower, underneath the horizontal line, you have a fish in the lower right-hand corner, and the lower left-hand corner is a beast, like an animal of some sort. And the upper left, which this would be your upper right, so you'd see the fish there, and over there you'd see the beast, and up here then you'd see a tree. And then the tree represents like the tree of life, the tree of light. And over here is a leaf, which represents, well, the sustaining of life, but also represents fire and ether. It's, the leaf is basically the same shape as a flame, and there's a reason for that. Well, anyway, but I'm just pointing out that these are seasons. These are 4 seasons that when you go around the wheel, any cycle goes around the wheel, they go around these 4 seasons. So that when we're in the arena of the beast, we're in that quadrant, that first quadrant, that's the quadrant where the beast is in his element. And man, you can do this and do that and everything. Well, we're just coming out of that right now. We're just coming out of that. That's what we're coming out of in 2016, according to the cycles. Yeah. And we're coming up into that arena where the tree is, where that tree of light is, and that tree of light. And what that means is that we have all this space now. Before, we were confined somewhat in our, what we could do and couldn't do and all that. All of a sudden, things opening up. Things are going to open up. And it's just like a tree growing in the air. You can grow this way, that way, that way. Any way you want to grow, you can grow. And there's nothing really stopping you or blocking you. So, these times in the past, with regard to man moving toward Jehovah's kingdom on earth in its fullness, they've been times of separation, of great separation, where the good come out sort of from the evil. And the reason for that is, you see the beast, in man in that first quadrant, which again is your lower left quadrant, and moving up toward that's the north station down there, moving toward the east station. And that quadrant, it's in darkness, and it's below the horizon, and the beast has his heyday, and so it's very difficult to get things done. And as far as in the outer realm for Jehovah and doing things, well, they have to deal with the beast more at that particular time, because the beast is stronger there. Well, anyway, as we move into the light, because we can also consider this to be like midnight at the north station, and then as we move up and we hit the east station, that's like a sunrise. Boom, all of a sudden, woohoo, that's yeah, well, that's what we're coming up to. But it can also be compared to a birth. So the conception happens down at the north station, and then it comes up, it gestates in the womb. Now, it's still there, the life is still there, the child is there and everything, but it's like they're there and they're not there, but after birth, when birth comes in the east, it's like, boom, the child is there. Everyone knows it. There's no mistaking it. There's the child, and it's more real to a lot of people because of their corporeal senses, with their corporeal. So that's comparable to the time that we're coming up to, this sort of like a birthing time. Or, what happens with the beast, though? See, this is the beast. The beast, he's coming up he's going to come up out of his arena, and he's not going to be happy because things aren't going his way so much anymore, And he liked it when it was dark, and he could do his things and hide in it and do stuff surreptitiously and all that stuff. But that's all about the change. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the beast is going to just, turn aside and let it happen. Because but what happens generally, I mean, because they also feel this freeing and all that, and so they go, my project, I'm gonna go and get it forward and all that, except for, here's the thing, because it's based on the beast, it doesn't rise very far, because it's too much heavy weighted with corpor, whereas the Faithists, those who stay with the light, with the S light and everything, they rise up. They rise up with the, it's almost as if the creation itself is like a motorboat, and it's pulling along, and you're on a parasail. And because we're light, we rise up. But the beast, because he's so heavy in corpor and all that, he doesn't rise up very far. But because he's so distracted with his own thing and he's not getting it done and all that, he's kind of distracted. Well, you can get a lot of the good things done for Jehovah at that time. See, because that's the arena. Now, the Jehovah and his 8 children, they have arenas in the 4 quadrants. There's a male and a female in each of the quadrants. And so, starting with with that first quadrant, it starts with Uz, and then it goes to Hak. So that's they each have half of that where, and this arena is basically their seat or their home. It's where they're felt most acutely. And so we come under sort of that influence of what that entity is. And so, and of course that makes sense too, because that's a birthing time. Now this horizon, that's a light above, darkness below. Now darkness is not bad. There's nothing evil about darkness at all. The only thing is that evil likes darkness because it can get away with stuff and it can hide, and in the darkness, so evil likes darkness. But all gestation happens, all growth comes out of darkness. And in the mother's womb and the womb of the earth, it's all dark, and then and that's because it's coming from form. That's because in the north down here, because it goes east, west, north, south, or from you as you're looking at it, would be east, west, north, south. And so this is a time of gestation. It's a time of awakening. It's a time of moving from essence, the perfected essence down here, because at the time of conception, and it doesn't have to be a conception of a human being, it could be a conception of an idea, of a project, anything. When that happens, you get an idea. Wow, it just struck. I know how to proceed now. And so you move toward getting that into form and into the outer realm, into this world out here. And that's the gestation period. And that's moving through through a period of whatever, you find your parameters for your righteousness, for growth. That's Uz. Uz is a servant of Elohim Rhea, and Uz said, the all person says to Uz, well, okay, this is the leeway I'm giving that person. Here's his parameter. It's the righteousness. How much slack is he going to give you? How much and everything? And so everything that's outside that gets that doesn't get supported, but anything that's inside that, it continues on. And anyway, so so the growth then moves along through Uz, and then moves into Hak as it moves towards form, because they're going from the perfected essence toward form in the east. And then the form is born. The form is born like in a child is born. The form is there. Now it's not a perfected form though, and that's the next phase. Then it goes from form to perfected form, and remember that's the ideal. So that's the second quadrant toward perfected form. And well, that's the time that we're in. That's I should say, that's the period that's coming up. Now, the reason that that's 133 year in a third year cycle. Well, actually, it says in philosophy, spells. Well, they're the number one rule in prophecy, spells. And a spell is 33 years, we learn in philosophy. And then there's an ode, which is the second rule, and that's 1/3 of a spell, or 11 years. And then you have the spell, it's called a sweep, which is 100 years, which is 3 spells. Now, they say 99 years, and then they say, 3 spells, 99 years, plus you have to add a year. Now, why do you have to add that year? You have to add that year because a spell is actually 33 and a third year. So 33 and a third, and then it becomes 2 of those, becomes 66 and 2/3, and then you add 33 and a third to 66 and 2/3, and you come up with 100 years. And then there's 4 of those sweeps in a wave or a time, which is 400 years, philosophy says. Now, the thing about any cycle is you can put it on the wheel of life. So you can if you wanted, you could put that sweep of 100 years on a wheel of life, and the first quadrant would be 25 years, and the second quadrant another 25 years, so it would put it at 50 years. And then in the west would be 75 years, and back to the north would be 100 years, and that's your cycle on the wheel of life. But you can also put the cycle itself on the wheel of life as one of the quadrants, so that you can have 4 spells, for example, on the wheel of life. And so if 3 spells is 100 years, 4 spells is 100 years plus 33 and a third years. Okay, and so on that wheel of life, that means that every quadrant, the beast quadrant, and the tree quadrant, and the leaf quadrant, and the fish quadrant, they can each a spell. You can think of a cycle as, and what this cycle, when you put the spell within the quadrants on the wheel of life, it's called a sea spell, like a sea chief, like or a sea vortexia. It's like a chief spell, or something along those lines. Anyway, but it's called the sea spell cycle. And the sea spell cycle, well, let me tell you a little bit about our vagabole. Because our vagabole, below the horizon, then, because I mentioned it was light up above and dark below, but also underneath is earth and water, and above is fire and air. But now, when you drop down into the fish, which was in the lower right-hand quadrant, then that is Corpor in water. And then when you go from the north to the east station, which then, as you look at it, would be on your lower left, then that's the beast, and the beast is water in Corpor. So the fish was Corpor in water. You can understand that, a fish Corpor in water. Fish going Corpor through water. But for the animal is the water in Corpor. And what that means, if you think about it, animals, we're big bags of moving water. We have a lot of water, and we carry our water supply around with us. But that's what it represents. And so when we get up then to the tree of light, we're talking about fire in the air. So the air is allowing space. It's space allowing for fire to express itself, which is the tree spirit to express itself, if you will, or form to come out toward its perfected form. And then the leaf itself represents the air and fire. When we travel around the wheel of life, and wheel of light and the wheel of a cycle, we pass through these conditions, and people react accordingly. And so if you look at the past, so this C-spell cycle is very important because it's 133 years, because it has the spells in the quadrant, and the spells are the number one rule in prophecy. And what does that mean, number one rule? It means it's the most important factor for man's development. 33 and a third years. It's called a spell. Those who are born during that spell, that's called the generation of that. So in the first spell of Cosman, the first 33 years from 1849 to 1882, that was the first spell, but the people born during that time are of the first generation. And so when we've been at this time, when we're going up in the second quadrant from that time, which is going to be from 2050 to 2049. The last time that cycle was here was from 1882 to 1916. That's when Nubra went out to form Shalem. Nubra and his group and all those Faithists went out to form Shalem, and the Brotherhood of Light was founded. And so all these Faithists tried to go out and fulfill the spirit of the Father's kingdom on earth. Well, that was at the very exact time of that. Well, what happened in the cycle before that, the C-spell cycle before that, was 1749 to 1782. And what happened then? The Republic was founded. But what it means is that this was the foundation. What happened then was that the Republic was set up to provide man with an inorganic first resurrection so that he can grow and have self-aspirations, a life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, they said, the pursuit of individual happiness and all that. So this was about the individual self, and it's set up to sustain that. Well, so what? The inorganic first resurrection is not Jehovah's kingdom, no. But what it is just the foundation of all the resurrections. You cannot have, well, let's look at this. If you have Jehovah's kingdom on earth, or Jehovah's kingdom, which is actually the crystalline third resurrection, you have that. Well, you're still going to have underneath that, you're still going to have an organic second resurrection. You're still going to have an organic first resurrection, and you're still going to have an inorganic first resurrection. You have to have them there so they're step by step, so people can resurrect step by step up toward the perfection of Jehovah's kingdom on earth. And so what we see in the Republic was set up to sustain to make it possible for man of the first resurrection, inorganic first resurrection, to self-aspire, to self-improvement, but it was all for self, you see. But it was still the founding of Jehovah's kingdom, because you gotta have, and the foundation is just that. It was set there in a surety. A surety. It's not gonna go away. So because there were some republics in the past, like, back in Athens and Rome, way back when, they were of a high enough grade where they could sustain it for a little while. But it was here to stay at that point. That's why it's so important. That's why Jehovah made a holy day out of it. The Constitution and
Holy Compact Day.
Yeah, Holy Compact Day. Right. So that happened. Now, what happened in that second quadrant was they went forth to try and establish that republic, a better way of living than monarchy, a higher stage of living than what they had under monarchy. And so But they didn't quite, it wasn't established until a little bit shortly after that, into the third quadrant. And that's because the third quadrant has to do with the establishing of things. And that's where Faithist, son of Jehovah, one of those 8 sons and daughters, is in that third, let's see, for you it'd be over here, it'd be over here. Well, anyway, it'd be in the third quadrant, in the upper right-hand quadrant.
Yeah, actually it's easier if you just do it for you.
Okay.
Because the other person can see where your left and right is and they can figure it out.
Okay. Well, all right. So wouldn't that mean that in the east then, in the east in the second quadrant, what we're coming up to, so but before that, even that when we started the conception, who was there? It was Uz and then it was Hak. Well, now we're going to come into the time of Te. We're coming into the time of Te from 2016 to 2032. And then after that, we're going to move into the time of Esphone. Yeah, but that's the time of Te. And so you see, even the beast, they feel this call for Te, only they put it to self, self purposes, but they still respond to it, but they're just, because it's for self, they don't really, like in Jehovah's Kingdom, book of Jehovah's Kingdom on earth, they talk about the different people who respond to the call of Te. You have Aborn and Suda and Thurdus and Amos. All these are responding to the call of Te. They all want to do good in the world. They all want to bring about the Father's kingdom on earth, regardless of what they call it or anything like that. So these are, and so what the book of Jehovah's Kingdom on earth says, well, okay, but this is really the highest point here. Here's your ideal. Here's your perfection. And they explain what that is. With the children and all that and the Shalem and so forth. So we're coming up into that time where people will, start to, do those things. Well, that was the establishing of the Republic back in that time. And then the next time was Nuremberg going forth. And the next time, well, man's going to be going forth toward fraternity. But let's look at it. I want to go back even before that. Because even before, you can go back further even before that, just to prove the potency of it. So what happened in the previous sea spell cycle before 1849 before 1749 to 1782? Well, that was in 1616 to 1649, and guess what happened then? The Pilgrims came over to Gautama, and so there was again a separation. Just like from the Republic, those people separated from the old monarchy. Nuremberg and those guys separated from the Uzzians. And what happened back then is that Columbus and all that, he opened up the door for this new world, for the founding of the Father's kingdom. That happened at that time. Remember Columbus, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that from 1482 to that was the time before the Pilgrims. Hey, I jumped back a further sea spell, but that was also exactly at that time. And when the Pilgrims came out, that was exactly the same time when the Republic came. It was all in that quadrant, all during that time. And this is what we're coming up to. And you can go back further even than before Columbus. What was the cycle before Columbus? Well, guess what? That was from 1349 to 1382. And what happened then? That was the humanist movement. That was the beginning of humanism. And 1349, Petrarch and all those guys. And what that was basically a separation from the Christian church, from Christianity. See, toward the human. Let's get humanized here. Let's sort of get real in a sense. So you see, this cycle has potency. Very much. And the beauty of the cycle is that not only are there quadrants, but there's houses. Mm-hmm. There's 12 houses. Remember, Osiris the First gave the Ankh with 12 houses, 12 divisions of man and all that. And these 12 divisions If you put the C-spell cycle into 12 sections, 12 houses, you get a node in every house. Every house is a node. 11 years. And, Oahspe tells us how important 11 years is. And that's so, and 3 11s is a spell, which is a quadrant. And so you have the first 3, and then the second 3, and then the third 3, and the fourth 3. 3, 6, 9, 12 of those odes. Now every generation, or every spell, well ideally, the spells of the generation, it will equal in duration the spell. A spell is 33 and a third year. And in Cosman, that's basically where we are. 33 and a third year. Mm. So, every generation that's born during that spell, during their particular spell, they carry forth in what they were imbued with, what that spell was imbued with. And so there's progression in these cycles. In these C-spell cycles, there's progression. And one of those progressions, if you start with the C-spell, that starts actually at the bottom in the north in 1716. And it goes all the way around to 1849. And during the second quadrant of that is when the Republic was founded, right? Okay, well that C-spell was for man to experience form. And what do I mean by form? Well, we mean form. How do you in order to get what you need, you have to have system and order, and you have to have it has to take a form of some sort. Now our body, our physical body is a form, and it's a system and order and so it comes together in this type of a form. Well, the important thing for man to understand at that time, because we're talking about movement towards Jehovah's kingdom on earth, is that a certain form, man needed to understand that you had to have the right kind of form in order to progress. And that form, for him at the time, was the Republic social order. Now, what does that mean, Republic social order? Well, that actually has to do with a grade group. And in Oahspe, well, you're not going to find this in the 1882 or 1891. It was in the Oahspe that was prior to that, in the 1881 Oahspe. But it's in the Oahspe Standard Edition, but it's called the Tablet of Grade and Ingrade. Are you familiar with that at all? It has a triangle, and then there's a triangle up above with the apex pointing down right above it. And this bottom one represents, there's 5 grade groups. And the first grade group, the bottommost one, and they have 21 members in it, because this is about proportionality. And this was the count at the beginning of Cosman. There were 21 people in that bottom grade group. The next grade group up, there were 13 people. The next grade group up, there were 7 people. The next grade group up, there were 3 people. And the 5th grade group, there's just 1 person. Okay, that's 45 altogether. So the proportion of that top one is 1 to 44. There were 44 that were in that pyramid, sort of beneath them, in that triangle beneath them, and then 1 at the top. So, but why I'm bringing this up is because that bottom grade group represents grades 1 through 24. Now, grades 1 through 24, in order to understand this, you have to understand remember how it says in Oahspe that Jehovah's Kingdom grades nations or groups. And they grade nations or groups by how many people are above grade 50 compared to how many people are below grade 50. So, if you got 1 person out of 100 who's above grade 50, then you stand at grade 1. If you have 24 people out of 100 who stand above grade 50 in that group, then that group still stands in that first grade group. The first because it takes 25 grade 25 to get in the second grade group. But those, when you have a nation in that lowest grade group, that's good in a sense, because that means that they are eligible for monarchy, which is the first government of man. And before that, they're not even eligible for a monarchy. And man went through that phase. He went through that phase in the first two eras, first 24,000 years of his life. In the first era, remember, was man learned that he had capacity for knowledge, dominion, and power. And this was the first era. And in the second era, the angels taught man to stand upright. Okay? And during those times, he didn't have a governor. He didn't have a king, a monarch. He was just, and he wanted, because remember what it says, and man wandered about on the earth. You know, so, but it wasn't until the third era when man was brought together, because, why? Because he had risen in grade sufficiently into that first grade group to where he could, having a monarchy, a king and all that, would be he could grow in spirit and move in ascension toward Jehovah's kingdom. So he was there. The people are able to sustain a monarchy when they're from grade from 1 to 24. But when the people move from grade 25 to 34, then they become capable of living in a republic social order. And so what's the difference now? A monarch, you know, he rules by fiat, and he rules basically by his presence and threat and violence. Well, yeah, and actually, if you look at that in anarchy, yeah, how did you resolve differences or whatever? It was just fight, right? And but when you have the monarchy, then there was some then it just could be a threat of violence, and that would keep people in line. So this was you had governance by fiat and all that, and it had to be that way because people were basically almost all for self. You know, when you're that low grade, it's almost all for me, and the heck with society or whatever, you know. And so this is the time of the beast when Baugam, and then Balgang Gads and all that, and how would they rule? Personal rule and roar, you know, threaten violence, and I'm king of the beast and all this stuff. And so that was, but the second grade group, instead of rule by personal fiat and all that with the republic, that became more rule by law. Rule by, hey, now instead of looking at this person to know what to do, we've collectively grown sufficiently to where we can decide and sort of rule ourselves, so we can elect a representative, we can elect our president or whatever it may be. And that's the grade group from 25 to 34. Now, there's still a lot for self, but they're willing, they can understand, hey, if we want to have a system in order out there that protects me as I go about trying to do my self-service, my self-improvement and my pursuit of happiness and all that. So they're willing to sacrifice a bit, for the government, for the greater good and all that, but the system in order is still set up, and their highest is the laws. They fall back on the laws, and hence the Constitution and all that. And so, but when when the people try to move from a monarch to a republic, well, the monarch, he doesn't want to give up power, so he's going to fight and all that stuff and reactionaries and try to stop it. And most of the violence comes from the reactionaries, not from the republic people who are, trying to set the republic and all that. Well, we're moving into a time where we're going to transition from republic to fraternity, because fraternity now is the next grade group level up. When man has reached, a fraternity government is suitable when people are graded from 35 to 49. Now, they're still serving self more than Jehovah, but looky here. They understand that, well, they're feeling this, the vibes and all that and everything, the pursuit of happiness, but they realize that their own happiness depends upon the happiness of others. And so they want to get everybody happy. They want to get everybody taken care of just so that they themselves can be at peace, and live in a peaceful world. So they're not serving Jehovah more themselves. They still, they want that peaceful thing. Well, how are they going to do this? You say, but you see, so they're very much for, but they're not for, well, look, here what happens. Now you have the Balgan. Now, if he give his threats, if they don't do anything, then he'll fall back to violence. He'll fall back to the anarchy stage. If he has to, he'll do it. And so you got the Republic stage, which goes by the rule of law, but if they have to, they'll fall back to the Balgan and go, oh, you better do this or you're going to go and we're going to punish you. And so that's all that threat, from the monarchy. So they use that. And they're really loath to go back to violence, but they still, will fall back to violence. But the fraternity phase, now look, listen, if you want the vibes to be good and all that, you're not going to be for violence. So, you're going to say, hey, let's just cool our jets here and let's take it easy and everything. And so what they do is they rule by persuasion. This is the arena and the time for Bahgan, Bahgan. And he's the one with the sheep, the sheep head and all that. Because you see in the tablet of, well, there's a couple tablets that they're in, a few tablets that they're in, but they, Bainai, they're in that tablet. You can see them in there. And those are, those three, pardon?
Aries.
Right. And the Aries, one, and then the Talgan, they show that image, and they also show the Balgan one. So they show all those three leaders types. And the, well, this is going to be their season coming up, because you got to remember, they're still more for self than because the fraternity is not Jehovah's Kingdom on earth. Fraternity, what they do is, look, all right, we don't walk around with written agreements and all that stuff. They pretty much, they know the rules and all that, but it's not like they're, but it's a fallback. Basically you go by the vibes, and hey, it's like a family kind of thing. And
so it's a second resurrection?
Yeah, so it's like the second resurrection in a sense that you do things without written rules. You don't need a written constitution per se. But if they have to, they'll fall back on the rules. Just like the Republic, if they have to, they'll fall back to the one before them, do the threat. And so the fraternity will fall back and, fall back on the rules. They'll also, at times fall back to majority rule. Because if they can't reach consensus, which is the decision-making model for fraternity, then they're going to fall back to majority rule. They'll fall back to the one behind just so that, they don't drop all the way down to nowhere. But, so they'll fall back to that, and they don't like to fall back to the threat of Balgan, but they'll do it if they absolutely have to. But they really do not want to, and they certainly are not going to fall back into the violence one. So the fraternity is not going to do that. But now, you see, but that consensus model of decision-making and all that, that's different from Jehovah's Kingdom on earth. Jehovah's Kingdom on earth, that's the next level up. That's the next grade group from 50 to 69. And that's the only way that you can have Jehovah's Kingdom is when you have more than 50% of the people above grade 50. So, yeah, and so this, and each of these, have a purpose. So the Republic, it is set up to sustain the inorganic first resurrection and basically to deal with evil and its, in the ways that it does. But it's set up for the inorganic first resurrection. The fraternity is actually set up to sustain the organic first resurrection. Now, what do we mean by that? What we mean by that is first of all, the inorganic first resurrection, they're all for self. This is all for me. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get rich, and I'm going to build a boat, and I'm going to sail over here. I'm going to do this, I'm doing that, and it's all for me. But the organic first resurrection says, look, yeah, I'm going to improve myself and do this and do that, but I want to do it for a greater good, for the higher good, for this greater glory, for the Creator. And it doesn't, for real, as Faithists, we'd say, yes, for Jehovah, we're going to do this. We're aligning ourselves to Jehovah. Well, even if a person aligns himself, it doesn't matter what name they give Jehovah, but if they're aligning themselves to Him, then they're in the organic first resurrection. And this is what's coming up. This is what's coming up as we move toward fraternity, because fraternity is going to sustain the organic first resurrection. Well, let's look at the Republic. What does the Republic do besides sustain the inorganic first resurrection? That's the first thing. But the second thing is that it will allow for the organic first resurrection within its ranks. And it won't complain. Now, it's not going to nurture them. It's not going to go out of its way to do things for them, because its chief thing is to sustain the inorganic first resurrection, but it'll allow them to go there. And the organic second resurrection, they're like on the fringe, on the extremes. It's very difficult to do that. But in a Republic social order in a fraternity social order, they are going to sustain the organic first resurrection, but they'll allow for the organic second resurrection, and they're going to be better at this, not blocking the way and put up roadblocks like in the Republic social system. You can get a lot of roadblocks for people moving toward Jehovah's kingdom. But in the fraternity, those are going to kind of be removed because everybody wants the vibes better and so forth and all that. So this is what we're looking forward to. We're looking at a time of separation once again, when we've come up, all right, I'll do it from here from my point of view, right? All right, so we're coming up out of the beast, out of the arena of the beast where the beast has its heyday. And now we're moving up towards perfection, which is up there in the south. The highest point, the high Dan, the noon, high dang noon point, the sun. That's all that's a part of it. Well, this is where we're moving toward. And now, every sea spell, there's progression. Every sea spell, there's progression. The first progression we talked about, that was form. And that happened from 1716 to 1849. And man realized that if we're going to move forward, upward and onward, we need to have the right form for it. And so they changed the form of their government so that could happen. That was a lesson for man, the experience for man. Now, from 1849 to 1982, there was another lesson, and that sea spell was all about spirit. And it started off the first 33 years, spell of it, with the spiritualism movement, with all these spirits manifesting everywhere. Because that first quadrant, that northeast quadrant, which is to your lower left there, that is all about awakening. That's about awakening. And, that's the gestation period and all that. So that's an awakening period. And so people were awakened to the spirit world and said, hey, what is the ideal? This part of our ideal. This is a part of who we are. So this spirit realm and the realm of spirit, and what is spirit? Spirit is rah, 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 shish, goom, bah. Well, that's one type of spirit. Oh, horrible day. Well, that's another type of spirit, see, because it's almost like an emotion kind of thing, but we know what spirit is, and so you have an elated spirit or a depressed spirit or the spirit of the Taugan, which is the horns, two horns, the one of righteousness and the other of militancy, because they're Taugans, that's the Republic order and all that, but that's a type of spirit, see? But we all can understand that now because we've gone through that sea spell about that. And that first quadrant, that was about awakening up to the spirit. Well, what's that second quadrant about then? Well, that second quadrant, that's where the dawn was and the birth and all that stuff, and we're going out, the light into the air and all that. And Well, that's about applying what, it was saying, okay, that first one set the theme, that first quadrant. Here's your theme. And then the second quadrant says, well, let's see what we can do with that theme. Let's move with what we got toward perfected form, toward a perfect form. Let's get it all just as best we can. And so that's what happens at that time after, and this is what happened, anyway, about the spirit, that whole thing, about the whole sea-spell cycle. I won't go into the detail of what happened all the way around it in terms of spirit. But the third sea-spell cycle that we're in, that started in 1982, has to do with soul. Soul, baby. And this is the awakening of soul from 1982 to 2016. And all this stuff with the soul, that means that what's going to, well, just like you have like we were saying with the pregnant woman and the baby and all, it's not quite so obvious. But once that birth comes, once that sun comes up over the horizon, you can't deny it. I mean, it just becomes so obvious. And that's what sort of happens, is going to sort of be happening with, and from 2016 to 2049. Well, that's what the cycles say. That's what the cycles say. Whether it's going to turn out that way, well, we'll have to wait and see, And, so this is cool. And that's why, with the vibes and all that, with that, and that's why when 2016 and all that, there's a thing called the return of the Paradars.
The Paradars was given to men back in the time of the Uvanishore system, and they were taught by metaphors and analogies, and the Paradars would be seen as a beautiful bird. At the time that a good person died, he would see a beautiful bird appear in front of him, and the beautiful bird would say, "Come and inhabit me, for I'm your soul." And so the spirit of that person would then be carried in the form of that bird up into the higher heaven. So now that is so the Paradars is that light in the soul that resonates with the quality of that person's soul. So we have a perfect soul, which is part of the Creator, the All Soul, and that light actually resonates with that particular person's soul, so that person can then start to perceive their own soul and be able to perceive through their soul. So that you say that's the return of the Paradars.
Right, and that's because it hasn't been around for a while. That's we're in a time right now when the angels have actually stepped back a pace from man, and there's a reason, a good reason for that, and it actually has to do with the progression toward fraternity, and starting with Cosman. And so, for one spell, and there's actually 4 phases that's going to bring man to fraternity. And the first phase was from 1849 to 1882, and that was just a spell in duration. And then the second phase was a very long phase, and there was a reason for this very long phase. That first phase was introduce man to the spirit, but remember when the angels came to deliver to deliver the earth and our heavens, they came and they removed the 4 heads of the beast and they removed their heavens. What they didn't were all the demons and all the evil spirits on the earth plateau. They left them there. And there was a purpose for leaving them there. And it was actually multi-purpose, but one of the purposes was that man was told, and by the way, during that first spell of spiritualism and awakening spirit, that all culminated with the publication of Olaspi. And so then, so that was that first phase. And man learned what we're told in Ospey too. And that in interaction, in going forth, man's going to learn that, yes, to do good, it will manifest some goodness about you. But if you do evil, you're going to have evil companions, and evil's going to manifest about you. And that was the purpose of all these spirits being left there. One of the purposes is so that man, because man is dense, very dense sometimes, and so he had to have these heavier density spirits around him, to really get him to feel. So, and to perceive these things. And so the angels, all these druges and all that, they were left there. And on the earth, but it wasn't just the idiots that were left. But there were spirits who were very intelligent and organized and evil. And they didn't get taken up because just the heavens of the four false gods got taken up. And they wondered, and so, they didn't know why they were left there, but what the heck? They're going to make hay while the sun shone, so to speak, except it went the other way. They wanted for self, and they were all for self. And they didn't like the light. They didn't like what Jehovah was doing, and they set about to destroy it. But of course they didn't. And they were called the Brotherhood of Hack, but Brotherhood of Darkness. But anyway, they were all left here, and they were left here, all the way through a sea spell. They went all the way through. Now these guys are not stupid. These guys who were the heads of these dark organizations in spirit realm. And so they knew about these cycles and stuff like that. And they couldn't understand, how it was that they weren't really, it wasn't that they weren't really molested or anything or bothered by Jehovah's kingdoms or by the Etherians and all that. Yes, the Jehovah's kingdom was busy during this time, with inspiring mortals and everything, and trying to resurrect them, trying to resurrect the Druges. They were giving their hand at trying to, uplift them and everything. And, but they weren't, forcibly removed or anything like that, or just, through subterfuge or whatever removed. They just weren't. And so after the first spell went by, then no problem, and even a sweep went by of 100 years. There's no problem. They're still there. In 1949, the sea spell, 1982, they're still there. So they're feeling complacent, because now this is down in that first quadrant in the time of the beast and everything. So they're feeling overconfident and complacent and feeling they got it made. No, look, what they decided was that it's obvious that we're not going to stop this, so we're going to jump ahead and try and look like we're at the head of the parade. Do the old Louis thing, because Louis used to do that a lot. Look at me, you run up there. I'm leading the parade. No, you're not. But so this continued on until Cosman Day. And when Cosman Day came, this was in 2001, this huge pillar of bright Etherian light, it was just piercing, that Etherian light, pierced down into the earth, shoom, like that. And then it came back up and it went shoom, and it shot all the way around the earth. Well, I looked out my window there where I was living, out in the desert, on the middle of nowhere. And I looked out my window, and there's you read about the bowers and oh Dios, oh Dios, oh Dios, oh Dios, and that's all they do, and all that, because they couldn't, they were too stupid. Well, they had these spirits going by, warrior spirits kind of thing. It just, I don't know how many of it columns and columns and they were phalanx. It was a phalanx of it, And they were just going right by, and they were being, taken up and away and stuff like that. Well, now look, they removed all these evil spirits at that time, but anybody who died thereafter, after that, they just left. They didn't bother with, taking them out away or anything like that. But now there was a reason for all this, and here's the reason for all this. Okay, well, anyway, but that's one of the reasons why it says in Olaspi that Holy Cosmin Day was kept secret amongst the Faithists. Because they did not, God had inadvertently tipped his hand about Gautama. How that, you read about that. So there was going to be no mistakes this time. And it had the Brotherhood of Heck known about this was coming and all that, they would have prepared and they would have, done this, that, and the other thing. But, so they didn't know. It came as a total shock to them. I mean, and it marched around the world. It actually started on the west coast of Gautama and it moved eastward. I don't know why, but it did. And it moved eastward. And, all the way around the world. Well, but anybody who died after that, well, see, here's the thing. Now, you had people that were driven by evil spirits, drive, and so they get driven. But then when that driver is gone, the momentum still, they still carry forward in that evil. But here's the point of the whole thing was that before that, man could always blame the evil spirits for all the evil or all the problems and all that. But after
the devil made me do it.
The devil made me do it and all that. Yeah, it was the evil spirit made me do it. No, they can't say that. Not since Cosmin Day. Since Cosmin Day, man had to take responsibility for his own actions, for his own self. He couldn't blame the evil spirits because there wasn't any evil spirits. And he couldn't blame Jehovah's inspirers because they stepped back a pace. And so all man had was himself. He had to see and it's the time too. Remember, this is during the first quadrant, during the time of the beast. So man had to find out what the kind of metal that he had and was made of inside. And is he going to choose Jehovah or is he going to choose self? Well, I choose Jehovah. And so we choose Jehovah through our actions and all that. Now this is very important because when that dawn comes, those who are closer to Jehovah, they're going to perceive it a lot stronger and it's going to be a lot more clear than for those who have denied Jehovah. I mean, it's still going to be there, but it's just, so this is like a testing period in a sense. I mean, it's for man to learn to stand on his own 2 feet, but what it's about facing evil on its own account. Because remember, blackness, there's nothing evil about blackness per se or darkness per se. As a matter of fact, this very necessary hack is the daughter of Jehovah, after all. She's an entity. Okay, and that's a womb and all that stuff. Well, so we are in that condition where we're moving on to the 4th phase in 2016 to 2049. So this whole period, which is, there were 200 years given for fraternity to be founded, from 1849 to 2049. Started with a spell, it's ending with a spell. And the spell that we're ending with has to do with the return of the Paradars. Now, in your soul, you want to build, this is who you really are. This is who you feel best about, where you're most comfortable, and your delight. And the Paradars help you to see what it is that you want to move toward. Because the Paradars represent what you're going to become, your potential. But depending upon a person's grade, when they look at the Paradars, they might not see much of that potential. They actually you basically see who you are. But the Paradars, there's something about them that you can see beyond them, to what your potential is. Maybe a better way of putting this is like what it says in Olaspi. Those who were, good on the third day, where they rose to the top of the head, but the other ones came up, through the feet, kind of thing. But it's like during this time of darkness, people can hide in the darkness, and all those links, all those old links in the past, those old chains and all that stuff, those are all sort of dissolving away in this darkness. That's part of the reason for that darkness, is to allow for these old linkages that are no longer needed to dissolve away, and allow these new cords of light to link people together. And the paradars are going to help a person to find, that they're going to be able to more clearly perceive which way to go, left or right, when I'm confronted with this situation that I don't know which way to go to. And it's not the paradars per se, it's Jehovah through speaking through the soul. But because the paradars have been potentized, the person will be able to more clearly perceive the Creator's voice, the soul within them. Mm-hmm. See, and so, and this is, but it's just it's one of the seasons of Jehovah. So those are the four phases in this. So this last phase, excuse me, because this sea spell that we're in from 1982 to 2116 is for the development of the soul, and the fraternity is going to be set up so that man can develop his soul. Because man, that's where the good vibes and all that stuff. Because man's going to want to. But mostly, this is the fifth generation going to be doing this, because the fourth generation of Cosmin is in charge now. They've been in charge since 1999, and they're going to stay in charge. Well, the peak of their power is going to be in 2016, and then in 2032. From 2016 to 2032, they're going to wane in power, and the fifth generation is going to grow in power. And then at 2032, the majority will tip to the fifth generation, and they'll be in charge until 2066. And they'll be there from the founding of fraternity and all this. So they have a big role to play. Now we have a role to play too, the fourth generation. Mm-hmm. And the fourth generation has to do with keeping the best of what we've learned so far. It's like, and because in that fourth quadrant, that's who is there? Well, that's in the west, and so it would be your bottom right as you're looking there. But it would be in that first arena is Corporate, and then in the second arena is Cosmin. Mm-hmm. And Cosmin has to do with, granaries and preservation of records, preservation of that which is good. That's all fourth generation stuff, or fourth pulse of anything stuff, to preserve the good. But there's the beastly aspect of the fourth generation too, which wants to hold on to everything of the old beast. And they're not going to let go, and they want to micromanage and stop things from changing, because the fourth is all about transitioning and getting everything into harmony, integrating everything and allowing something new to come forth. So that makes it kind of difficult in some ways for people to go forth when you have someone in control who wants to hold everything back, But fortunately, the signs of the times are going to be in favor of the Faithists, in favor of those who move toward the light. But it's not going to be just the Faithists going forth. There's going to be everybody, and depending upon their ideals, because we're coming into the sixth spell guess what? From 2016 to 2049, it's the sixth spell of Cosmin, and 6 is the ideal. And so people are going to start trying to manifest their ideals and during that time. And so, but that doesn't mean that the beast is going to, give up and go away. But it's going to be interesting times. So anyway, but all that's from studies of cycles and what I received from inspiration from the Creator. So that's what basically we talked about this morning. This is a time of testing too, by the way. I mean, a time of testing of hope. We're almost done with the time of testing. Now, the time of testing of hope lasts until 2018, which, by the way, remember that dawn kind of thing happened in 2016, but that's almost like a black dawn. And what do I mean by that? Just like during our day here, it can be cloudy in the east, storm clouds or whatever, and the old sun's coming up, and you don't really see the sun because of the clouds and all that. So, but it's not going to last too long, because there's going to be this turnaround in light in 2017, 2018, when it's going to start climbing up, and it's going to continue climbing up into the dam. So, and always what happens during those times of increasing light is man gets uplifted. When there's time of decreasing light, which is what we're in now, then man has to hold it up. Man has to labor to keep it from falling. So that's sort of what the stage that we're in now. And but there's other cycles at play too. There's because the United States, while the world is being tested as to its hope, the United States actually went through that itself during that time of its cycle in the life of the United States. That happened in the 30s during the Great Depression. And so that really was a time where their hope was tested. But because of that, because the Republic was founded before Cosmin began, the United States gets to go through these cyclical periods before the rest of the world does. So that when the rest of the world gets to this time of testing of hope, which instead of having a Great Depression, like what happened in the United States the last time, the United States learned from it, they kept it from becoming a Great Depression.
It's just a really bad
recession. But it wasn't anywhere near as bad as the Great Depression was. And that's, but.
Well, for the majority.
Yeah, for the majority. Anyway. So so the point that I want to make here is that the United States actually right now is in a time of testing evil, being tested as to evil, as to how to deal with evil. And yeah. And so how is man going to respond to evil? And it's very interesting, because if you look around, most of the nations, they don't want to fight. They don't want to go to war. Even when there's so many temptations to go to war, they don't want to go to war if they can avoid it. And Helest was Persaï, was part of that way back when they had the cannibals and all that stuff, where the barbarians came out of and all that. But that was always sort of like the wild place of man, where he was like the last one to be lifted, so to speak, almost, along in that region. And Thoth, alias Gabriel, he took that region for himself. And remember what?
Last of the four beasts.
Yeah, last of the four beasts. And what did he say? He said, "I'm not don't claim to be for peace like these other guys. I'm for war, baby. Let's find out who's strongest and find out now." So that was sort of suited to that. But anyway, but this struggle actually has to do with moving into preparing them for fraternity, and actually moving them toward the republic phase even. Just, like we might think of as sort of because the people there, they want to have these freedoms that you see in a lot of the republic things, and they're being stopped from that. for different reasons. And so and now they're breaking out of that. They're saying, no, but you got these strong reactionaries saying, oh no, you don't. We're holding on tight and all that. But nevertheless, how do you deal with evil? But even with all that going on, everybody's more or less reluctant to go to war. But these people are standing up and saying, no, we want to change, we want change. Well, anyway, so this time of testing, how do you deal with evil? And that means that the world is going to go through that period a little bit later on. But that won't be until after the fraternities are established. Because the thing about the fraternities is, back in the 60s, you had different communes and everybody had their own standards. Somebody said, well, it's okay to eat meat, just be cool with the vibes. Somebody else would say, no, the vibes are most important. And, but you can have alcohol, and somebody else, well, you could smoke or free sex or whatever it happened to be. But that were their standards. But you had all these great varieties and this was actually on purpose, because this was man's experience as sort of a preliminary experience of fraternity. So man could get the sensibility or feeling of fraternity. And that's what it was. That's what came about in the 60s, because that was the peak of light. And it was, you had the civil rights movement and these freeing things and anti-war kind of things, and the women's liberation and all this stuff. But the hippies were also a part of this. The hippies and the ones who went forth to live a higher way of living, there's got to be a better, higher way of living. And they sort of lived in fraternity. They went along with the vibes, but they didn't understand it. They didn't know how to sustain it. They didn't really know what it was. They just thought, hey, we're just going to ride with it and it'll keep going forever. But of course, if they weren't doing those things to keep it sustained, it wouldn't sustain, and it didn't sustain. But the milieu was not supportive of it. It tolerated it, allowed it for a while, but then it, kind of started shutting it off and all that. But nevertheless, man got that experience, and it wasn't just here in Gautama. It was everywhere around the world in all different places, but mostly those of the higher grades. This fraternity, so all these varieties of fraternities, well, all that's going to be coming, because the second pulse of anything, including the second quadrant, is you take things to the extreme. You want to see, because that first one laid the theme, and then the second one is the extreme. So we see the theme. Where is it going to take us? Well, here, let's go. It seems like it's going to go here or here or here or there or there or there or there or there. And so you had all these extremes, people going to all these, and so fraternity, and that's a part of moving toward establishing fraternity, but it won't be established. People won't agree on something until after, 2049 Dan. But they'll agree sufficiently on, well, the fraternities are basically within themselves, they'll agree on something. And they'll have certain standards that they agree to. And between the fraternities themselves, they will agree upon certain standards. Now, initially how I see this as a separate thing I see the Republic still continuing on. I don't see that going anywhere, but I see it sort of withering away on the vine as people move away from that system toward a higher, better way, something that more fulfills their soul, And so you're gonna have people that are going out, and like I said, there's gonna be some who say, hey, let's do this in the social order. Right now, let's fix this Republic social order. Let's get this climate stuff taken care of. Let's get diseases taken care of, poverty taken care of. Let's get rid of racism and isms of this and isms of all the negative isms. Let's get rid of all, how do we do that, and how do we provide and stuff like that. But then, now you contrast that today with what I just heard about the other day, this old man in Florida, 95 years, or somewhere in his 95, 97 years old. He got arrested for feeding the homeless. They arrested him. They showed a picture of him, being sort of handcuffed and walked away by two policemen who looked very sheepish, like they would say didn't have to be there doing this. Isn't that sad? It's against the law, illegal to feed homeless people. What the? Who? When? Where? Why? Who wants to live in a society like? And the people in there said, well, we don't want homeless people lining up to get food here, and that was their reasoning. And I thought, how so sad, so sad, so far. How far removed from Jehovah can people get? But oh my word! And a 95-year-old man nonetheless. This old withery old guy in the end in handcuffs carrying. Oh my people! Look at this. Do you see what you're doing? Holy moly! No, they don't. They just. Oh well, it's a sad affair, but
sad.
Oh gosh,
it's terrible.
Oh, it's just. Oh man. Oh, that's just so sick. It's beyond words. Sounds incomprehensible. Oh my word. Jiminy crickets, holy cow.
Yeah, well, a lot of those places give them transport, one-way transport.
Yeah, one-way transport to a different city. Yeah.
Go somewhere else.
Yeah, I was saying to Houston, welcome here. Yeah, right.
And of course, if you don't feed them, then they're more likely to take the ticket,
Yeah, well. Yeah. All this stuff, it's because man, the angels stepped back a pace, the spirits are gone, so man, he's basically on his own compass, internal compass. What's he gonna do? And
wow.
Yeah, man. So but there's a lot of them turning toward Jehovah. You have to remember. Now remember, grade 35 to 49, that's fraternity level. They're capable of fraternity level government. That's suitable. They're suitable for that. But the government is not in place for that yet. So it's not there. So just like during the time of Moses, you had all these faithists there, working in Egypt. And Moses came and said, hey, the Great Spirit's got this place. You can come out here and we got this land for you and all that. And the faithists, that's the unknown, baby. We know what this is. At least, we'll be safe and all that. Why should we believe you, listen to you and all that? They didn't have the faith. So they had to, suffer through the plagues and they weren't touched during the plagues and all that. So they felt, hey, well, we have this protection, they had the courage then to go forth. Well, man doesn't need that severe of a thing in this time, but I sort of think that part of the plague to get the people to move toward fraternity is the republic order itself. And that's idiotic things like that happened in Florida, that make people think, who wants to live in a social order like this? There got to be a better social order than this.
I'm going to stop recording, okay?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't even know we were recording.